Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Anything with Alvin. Today we're going to be attempting to recreate what is called the original Alfredo from a restaurant called Alfredo alla Scrofa in Rome. Now I've watched the videos a few times over the years and it's always been fascinating to see how they do it with just a simple amount of ingredients. Mostly just fresh pasta, 2 ingredients for the sauce, butter and Parmesan cheese. This feels like one of those dishes where one of the make or breaks is the quality of your cheese and the quality of your butter, simply because those are the 2 that make up the sauce. So it's definitely important to use good quality ingredients for both, which brings us to today's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Danish Creamery. Level up any dish with the BCU secret weapon that we found in small batch premium butter. Danish Creamery knows that the extra time, extra effort, and the extra turns it takes to make exceptional butter makes a world of a difference. The butter is full of flavor with 85% butter fat, just what you need to unlock extra richness in a dish. Today we'll be making the original Alfredo from Rome, Italy, using Danish Creamery's European unsalted butter. Alright, let's get started. Now the first things first, we do have to make our pasta dough. The great thing about this recipe is that the restaurant themselves have actually made a video where they've described every single step down to the grams. So that made it a lot easier for us to figure out measurements. We're going to start with 250 grams of 00 flour, 250 grams of semolina flour, and sort of mix that together onto a work surface and make a well in the middle with the bottom of a bowl to crack our eggs into. This time we're going to use about 7 whole eggs. I'm going to go and give this a whisk until all those eggs have been nicely beaten up. Then I'm going to slowly fold in the flour mixture starting from the middle and then working my way to sort of pull in the edges of the dam of flour that they sit into. If they break, it's okay, we just push some more flour on the outside and eventually get to a point where the dough is sticky. We can use a bench scraper to involve the rest of the flour into it. This is going to take about 5 to 10 minutes and then we're going to go ahead and start kneading this consistently. Kneading again takes another 5 to 10 minutes. We have to make sure the dough is smooth, the dough is elastic, and when you press your finger into it, it kind of bounces back. Once that is ready, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up in saran wrap and let this chill and rest so that it is ready to be rolled out later. After about an hour or so, the dough has sort of softened up and also absorbed any of that excess moisture that it might have been inside. So it's now ready to roll out. We're going to cut this into quarters and get our pasta cranking machine and roll this out until it becomes little stubby rectangles. Press that down, pass that through on a 0 setting, pass that through on 1 and 2. And I like to do this thing where you laminate the dough. When it gets too long, you fold it back in on itself and restart the process. This helps it make it more elastic and less likely to break and give you a better mouthfeel when it's cooked, a little chewier. Then we're going to run the pasta through all the settings until about 5 or 6, depending on how you like your fettuccine. And then we're going to run that through the fettuccine cutter. Once that is done, this entire process gets repeated with the rest of the dough. Rachel had this great idea of using the oven handle behind us as a drying rack and sort of a way to make sure that the pasta wasn't all scraggled up into a sheet tray. So we're going to lay our pasta right on top of that and let that just hang out and dry for a little bit. Now that our pasta is done, let's go and address our cheese. In the video, they're using 24-month aged Parmigiano Reggiano, about 210 grams. We're going to double that because we have a lot of pasta. So I'm going to take the cheese and start to grate it on a grater. And after a little bit, realizes that there's a lot of cheese that we have to get through, and it's going to take some time before I get through this. So Rachel suggested another good idea that they used to do at her old workplace, which is use a blender. We're going to cut up the cheese into little chunks and throw that all into the blender and blend that until everything has been nice and pulverized. I think this gives you a little bit of a different texture than if you grated it. It's a little bit more condensed, more like the Parmesan cheese you get from a shaker than that fluffy, airy, curly Parmesan that you get on top of your pasta. But this is a little bit different because this is going to go into the sauce. So one interesting that they do is that they also not only grate their Parmesan, but they also sieve it and pass it through a fine mesh sieve. My guess is that it makes sure that the Parmesan particles are as small as possible so that when you emulsify it with the hot water and the butter, it kind of makes a smoother sauce rather than leave little grains or chunks behind. So we're going to pass this through a fine mesh sieve, which actually takes quite a bit of work. It doesn't just fall right through, but maybe our little sieve is too fine. Nevertheless, after some elbow grease, we have now achieved some really fine Parmesan. On to the second ingredient in our sauce, some good old butter. I'm using Danish Creamery's unsalted butter here, just taking a couple sticks, cubing that up and making sure that that goes directly onto our serving dish as they do in the video. We're putting 120 grams of butter onto our serving dish here, and then we're going to go to our pot, which is now boiling with water, and cook our pasta. First, I'm going to salt the water pretty heavily, and then I'm going to drop in half the pasta pasta that we made, cooking this for about 45 seconds. It's really fresh pasta that's relatively thin, so it barely needs any time to cook, and it'll continue cooking once we take it out of the pot. After 45 seconds, just like they do in the video, we're gonna drag the pasta straight from the pot into the serving dish. My guess is that it brings a lot of that pasta water that comes with it, and you kind of want a little bit of that water, but not too much. Once all the pasta has been evacuated from the hot bath, we're gonna go ahead and give this a little bit of a mix to get that butter a little warmed up and liquid before we add the cheese. Now, I'm thinking this is a little bit on the dry side, so I'm gonna add a scoop or two of more pasta water to get that emulsion going, and then we're gonna go on top with all of the cheese that we grated. Now, this is the really fun part. They have a special person at the restaurant that does this table side. It's called mantecatura, which is the process of turning the cheese and the butter into a sauce. Now, the guy in the video is really good at this. He's been doing it for such a long time and has this masterful flick of the wrist and a twirl of the fork and a scrape of the spoon. I, on the other hand, am simply trying to imitate him. So I'm shaking my fork and tossing this around. Not sure if I'm doing it correctly, but the goal here is to create an emulsion, so as long as we get there, that's all that matters. I think this pasta is looking pretty good. The emulsion is pretty smooth, the pasta is coated, and I present to you our version of the original pasta Alfredo. It's definitely a little bit more pale compared to the one they have in the video, but I'm guessing that has to do with the quality of our eggs and how the colors in eggs can differ from countries to countries. So the taste is actually quite surprising. This one tasted like the pure essence of Parmesan cheese. Like if you just ate Parmesan cheese as a liquid and just threw it in your mouth. It was really good, very strong, but a little bit too one note. And I actually didn't feel like it was buttery or creamy enough. But good thing we have a second batch of pasta that's ready to go. So this time we're gonna do the exact same thing. Cook the pasta in the water, but this time we're gonna double the butter that we used from the first time because, well, more butter is more better. Rachel was kind enough to grate a lot of that cheese off camera so that we had enough for a second batch. We're gonna go ahead and perform the little butter Parmesan pasta water dance from the first time. Splattering again all over. I don't know how he does it in the video and not let it go everywhere, but I'm guessing that's because he's good at his job. Now this sauce is definitely looking more like traditional Alfredo sauce, at least I'm used to. It's a lot more creamy, it's a lot more bright, and it's a little bit thicker and coats the noodles in a little bit more of that sticky, glossy way that is super delicious. I have a feeling this is probably the better ratio. This is a delicious pasta that is simple, that really brings out the essence of the ingredients, so make sure you use good ones. It's also kind of fun to make because you don't really need too much to do it. Now I've heard that the restaurant in Italy does attract a lot of tourists, which does make a lot of sense. I don't know if this is a dish that I would pay an exorbitant amount for in a restaurant, but it was fun to attempt at home. I think the key takeaway for me was that it just highlights really good quality ingredients. Good flour, good butter, good eggs, and good cheese. And the best part is we made so much pasta that everybody in the studio gets to eat all of it and take all of it home. Thanks again to our sponsor Danish Creamery for bringing you this episode of Anything with Alvin. If you're looking for a dish game changer, consider Danish Creamery butter.